and Sarah Zara for health and prosperity of Sarah Rahel ben Dora and Ezra Chaim ben Deborah, and also sponsored by Dr. Aaron and Charlene Kahen for the health, happiness, and success of their children and their entire greater Kahen family, and for Ilui Neshama of their very special father, Alav Shalom, Dr. Nisan ben Moshe HaKohen, that his Neshama should have an Aliyah. Amen.
Amen.
So we are, as we mentioned, in the first middle white lines by 2 dots. The Gemara says, Hamashmiya kolo bitfilato hareze miketane amana. A person that lets his voice be heard during the tefillah, this is miketane amana. Why? Because it's as if to say you're suggesting that Hashem can't hear you when you say it very quietly to yourself, that you have to say it out loud and Hashem should hear. What kind of emunah is this? Hashem knows all the thoughts of the deepest recesses of your heart when you think something. So you think that you have to speak out loud that for Hashem to hear? That's miketane amana. Says the Gemara, Amar Rav Huna lo shanu ela sheyachol lechaven et libo. Rav Huna says that's only if you're doing it just because. But if you're doing it because you can't have kavanah in the scenario, in the setting that you are, then you're not miketane amana. Then you're doing it for a purpose, for a cause. For instance, let's imagine there's a little music background and it's disturbing you, and you want to just hold your ears and saying it a little bit out loud to yourself in order to retain your kavanah. Says Rav Huna, that's fine. No problem with saying it out loud if you have the proper reason for it. It's just that if you say it in a way that you're indicating Hashem can't hear you, that's a problem. Of course, as we mentioned before, the Zohar HaKadosh says, based on the Gemara later on in Daf Damed Aleph, on page 31, the Gemara is going to learn from Chana, the mother of Shmuel HaNavi. It says, Rak sefatea naot vekola lo yishamea, that her lips were moving and her voice was not heard. The Gemara says, oh, kama hilchata Rav Ravati, how many halachot we learn from this one thing of Chana? Sefatea naot, we learn that you have to actually verbalize the words, you have to lip them. You can't just think them. Thinking, machshava lav kedibur. Thinking is not like saying. So you have seen sometimes people are benching, they're humming the voice, or even not that. Right? Sometimes it's just the finger is moving. You're not yotzeh like that. Absolutely, it's as if you didn't bench. You have to actually say the words. Your lips, sefatea naot. But says the Gemara, kola lo yishamea. Her voice was not heard. And therefore, from there we learn that a person that davens, her voice should not be, or his voice should not be heard. And Zohar HaKadosh takes this to a much higher level. The Zohar HaKadosh says, if your voice is heard here, your voice is not heard up there. Your tefillah is not going to be accepted. And the Zohar says, even yourself should not be hearing it. We mentioned Maran Shulchan Aruch says you have to whisper it in a way that you hear it yourself. And the Mishnah Berurah brings the Zohar HaKadosh, the Kaf HaChaim, of course, paskins like the Zohar. Even the Bet Yosef in Bedek HaBayit himself brings the Zohar, and it's not so clear which way he conquers, but nevertheless, the Vina Gaon, Shcharu Harav, Chaye Adam, many others, they say that a person should hear themselves, but the minhag of nowadays, at least the minhag of the Sfaradim, has been not like that. Now, the part of the minhag is because of the next Gemara. I said all of this as a preface to the fact that the Gemara says, "Aval en yachol lechaven libo belachash mutar." If you can't have kavanah and you're saying it a little bit loud that you could hear, then it's mutar. And then the Gemara says, "V'hane mili beyachid." That's only when you're standing and davening alone. Aval betzibur. But if you're standing next to somebody else, ati lemitrat zibura, then you're going to be disturbing other people, and that's not mutar. Deal with it. Try to have kavanah. Whatever it takes. You know, the book Praying with Fire actually was a chavruta of Rabbi Yisrael Reisman. Whoever knows Rabbi Yisrael Reisman, the tremendous Talmid Chacham. Now he's the Rosh Yeshiva of Torah Vadat. Has been brought to fame by many things of his special personality, especially by his Motzei Shabbat shiur that has like 1,400 people listening to it, live and by live hookup, and it's amazing. So he once said, I worked so much. He worked on a Sefer Repeat, the Art Scroll Repeat Sefer English is him, right? It was a serious time. He says, in all the editions I made, my Chavruta made this book, Praying with Fire. The first print sold more than I sold in 10, 15 years, right? Because everyone is challenged with praying with fire, praying with kavanah, and he actually has like 6 different etzot how to come with kavanah. Oftentimes they're opposites. Daven slow, daven fast, daven with chuckling and moving, daven standing like a stick, not moving. Sure. And the yesod, the fundamental thing is sometimes you just have to change from your norm in order to have kavanah, in order to be mindful, not to give into the routine of life. Sometimes you just have to change a little bit. So deal with it. If you're in tzibur, you cannot disturb other people on account of you davening b'kavanah. It can't be on the cheshbon of other people losing their kavanah because you want to daven. Figure it out yourself, says the Gemara. By 2 dots, the Gemara says, this is 4 lines down from Y lines. The Gemara says, Ama Rabbi Abba Havaka mishtamit mine Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Abba was hiding himself from Rabbi Yehuda. Why? The Havakabai the Misach Ta'arare. So he wanted to make Aliyah. See, it was not a new thing. And Rabbi Yehuda was against people making Aliyah, right? Not because he was not Zionist, but because he in Halacha, the Shita he held is asur to go to Eretz Yisrael. Why? This Gemara actually is mentioned verbatim in really the real sugya. This is in Masachet Ketubot. Where's the Daf Yomi holding? He's gonna get there very soon. Kuf Yud. Where is that? Okay, so you're gonna get there soon. And Daf Kuf Yud and Kuf Yud Aleph mainly. 110, 111, the Gemara discusses that that's the main sugya over there in Masachet Ketubot. Rav Yehuda held based on a pasuk that Hashem said you're gonna go to Galut and you're gonna stay in Galut until I take you out, right? So says the Gemara, the Amar Rav Yehuda, Kol ha'oleh mi Bavel le'Eretz Yisrael. Anyone that goes from Bavel to Eretz Yisrael, over ba'aseh, is going to be transgressing a mitzvat aseh. Shenemar, as it says, Bavel yuvau, they will be brought to Bavel in Galut, the Navi prophesizes, Veshama yihu, and there they should stay ad yom pokdiotam neum Hashem, until the day that I take them out, says Hashem. So Rabbi Yehuda said, well, this means don't go out of Bavel, don't go to Eretz Yisrael even. Now, what's the big kasha on this, by the way, Rabotai? The bomb kasha is, someone say, please. When we're talking about Bavel Yuvau, they will be brought to exile to Bavel. Which destruction is this? First temple. Rabbi Yehuda is in, not second temple, many years after the destruction of second temple. So, Lichora, right, and surface understanding, Ezra and Nehemiah, they took the Jews up to Eretz Yisrael and built a whole Beit HaMikdash, and the Beit HaMikdash was there for 420 years, and then it was destroyed, and now they are in Romi and Babel and all of the Persia, they're all over the place. This is the time after. So this is, of course, a very strong question, and it needs its own talk and discussion, but you see from many Rishonim, many Mefarshim, that the Bayit Sheni was not considered a real redemption. The Chazal tell us that in Bayit Sheni, they still would fast on Tisha B'Av. Even though Tisha B'Av is for destruction of Beit HaMikdash, and you have the Beit HaMikdash, because 5 elements of the Beit HaMikdash never went back. You didn't have Shekhinah. Shekhinah was not Shuya in the way it was in Bayit Rishon in the second temple. You didn't have the Aron. The Aron was missing. The chest plate of the Kohen Gadol was not working. You have the Urim Vetumim. Many things you didn't have in Bayit Sheni, so we never went back, so to speak, to that. So Rabbi Yehuda holds that even though that we are way past that, you can't say that Ad Yom Pokti Otam, you can't say that until the day I called them back was referring to Bayit Sheni. So we're still waiting, so to speak, for the final redemption, final Geulah. That's the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda. So therefore, going back to the actual story, Rabbi Abba was hiding himself from Rabbi Yehuda because he was packing his luggage to go to Eretz Yisrael. He said, well, if he understand, he's gonna tell me don't you dare going anywhere. But the last day, right before his El Al flight and problems with passports, he said, let me go to Beit Midrash and learn something. Says the Gemara. By the way, why is this assay? It says Shama Yihu, there they should be. So it's a mitzvah assay, Rabbi Yehuda said, that you have to stay there. If you move away, you're transgressing an assay of Hashem telling you, you stay there until I call you, basically out. Says the Gemara, Amar, Izil ve'eshma mineh milta, mi bet vada. Let me go and learn something from Bet Midrash before I go to Eretz Yisrael. Ve'hadar afik. And then I go. Azal ashkech le'tana dekatani kabed Rabbi Yehuda. He went to Bet Midrash and he saw a Tana that is saying a Dvar Torah in front of Rabbi Yehuda. And here's what he said. Haya omed bitfilah. If a person is standing in the middle of Tefilat Shemona Esrei, is davening lachash, venit atesh, and he sneezed. You remember we mentioned sneezing could mean in the language of Talmud, in the language of the Gemara, it could mean that he sneezed what we call sneeze, or itushel mata, meaning passing gas. Here is referring to passing gas. It's Gemara. Mamtin achi ichle haruach or hareach. You wait, you pause, you stop davening until the smell is gone. Vechozeru mitbalel, and then you go and daven. Now, we mentioned before that's asur to pass gas. It's a siman ra. It's a bad, omen to pass gas. But if you did, says the Gemara, what are you gonna do if you did? If you did, you have to stop until the smell is gone, and then and only then you could continue your tefillah. Says the Gemara. Ika de Amri. There are those who say Haya omed bitfilah bikesh leit atesh. If you are standing in tefillah and you have an urge to pass gas, you can't control it. You have stomach problem, whatnot. Speak to your gastroenterologist, and you can't control it. So what do? Says the Gemara, marchik lachorav dalet amot. You go back, you step back 4 amot, 6 feet, umit atesh, and then you do what you need to do. Of course, we're talking about the case that you don't have tefillin on. That's a different one. We talk about mincha arvit, for instance, or a scenario you don't have tefillin on. And then you wait until the smell is gone. Then you step forward to the place that you were standing in originally. And you continue davening, but you pause your davening by a text. What's the text that you're going to say? Imagine you're in the middle of mamash, in the middle of by modim. You're in the middle of tefillah. You go back, you do what you have to do. You come back after the smell is gone, and you say like this. You have an insert in the tefillah. Omer, Ribono shel olam, Hashem, yetzartanu nekavim nekavim. This is like Asher Yatzar 2.0. You created us full of holes. Chalulim, chalulim, galui v'yadua lefanecha cherpatenu. We are disgraced. We have bodily needs. Very low human needs that we have. Uchlimatenu, we are ashamed of it. Bechayenu, even when we are alive. Ubacharitenu rima v'tolea, and our final destination is going to be rima v'tolea. Umatchil, and then matchil makom shpasak. Then you continue from the place that you stopped before you step back. And Amarle, he said, or Amar, he said to himself, this is Rabbi Abba, came before his flight to listen to something before he goes to Eretz Yisrael, and he says, Ilu lebati ela lishma davar ze dai. If only I came to listen to this one halacha and learn this one halacha, dayenu, basically, it would be sufficient. This amazing thing I learned. Baruch Hashem. Says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan. This is the last middle wide lines by 2 dots. Tanu Rabbanan, hayaya shel metalito venu yachol leotzi et rosho. Back to someone that's sleeping and he's naked and he wants to say Shema. How do you say Shema? When you wake up early in the morning, you say, oh, it's time for Shema. You want to say Birkat Torah, you want to say your Shema. But you're naked. Now, for understanding this sugya, you have to understand one halakha that we're going to be discussing in the following Gemarot. And that is by the halachot of warfare, The Torah Kedosha says, when you go to wage war, to battle, aside from your klezayin, aside from your guns and weapons and swords and spears and everything else that comes with it that you also have to have a tool called yatet yelecha ala zanecha. You have to take a small shovel with you, that when you need your bodily needs met, you go outside the machaneh, you dig, you do what you need to do, you cover it, the kisita etzeatecha. You cover your excrements, right? Now talk about hygiene level, talk about kedusha. Both of them, this is, imagine 3,500 years ago, the Torah says, you're in the middle of a war. Who cares about, no, you have to have it. You have to have a small shovel with you. You go, you want to go to bathroom, you have to dig, you have to cover your excrement. And then it says, V'haya machanecha kadosh, in order that your encampment should be kadosh, V'lo yera'eh becha ervat davar v'shav macharecha. And ervat davar, nakedness, should not be seen amongst you, because v'shav macharecha, Hashem is going to return back from you if it's not kadosh. Ki Hashem elokecha mitalech bekerev machanecha. Hashem is walking amongst your encampment. V'haya machanecha kadosh. V'lo yera'eh becha ervat davar. So there are few things that are learned from this. A, that you have a machaneh. Every individual has their 4 amot surrounding them, is called their immediate surrounding, their encampment. A. B. You have to cover the tzoah, the excrement, because you cannot see ervat davar. A, you cannot be in the same machaneh, in the same area with the tzoah, with excrement. And B, when you say dibur of kedusha, davar dibur, when you speak in kedusha, you cannot be naked or be exposed to nakedness. Even though that you don't see it, you cannot be exposed to nakedness. Which the Gemara is going to learn a very important halacha, that liboro et ha'erva is a problem. If you're naked in a way that your heart even could see your erva, imagine you're wearing one of those like doctor gowns, right? So you don't see anything because it's covered, but you have nothing under the gown. And you want to say bracha, not mutar. Because libor et erva, your erva is to some small extent exposed. Therefore, you have to make a hefsek. You could even do like this, like a woman that goes to mikveh and makes a bracha. Same thing, a ger tzedek that goes, a man ger tzedek that goes to mikveh for becoming the final step of becoming ger. They dunk once and they come out, they make a bracha, and then they dunk again. That bracha, aside from having a kippah on or some cover, you need to have a hefsek between the lev and the erva alachais. The Gemara is going to discuss this. Do you have to have a hefsek between your eyes and your erva, between your heart and your erva? All of that is what we're going to discuss in the Gemarot right now. Says the Gemara. Tanu Rabbanan. Imagine you live in Canada and it's winter and it's pretty cold and you want to say Shema. Early morning, you're under the blanket and you can't stick your head out because it's too cold. So what do? How do you say Shema underneath the cover? And let's imagine you even have a gown, but under the gown, you have nothing. So what do? Says the Gemara. You take the neck of your gown, your cover, your talit, and you tighten it around your neck and savaro. That's the concept of tie, comes from Talmud, right? You tie it basically over here. You make it with your hands tight up here, and now there is a hefsek. This man the Amar, which we don't pass in like, this man the Amar holds you need to have a hefsek, a division between your head and your erva, right? And that's sufficient, even though that you're under the cover and you're not wearing undergarment, you're not having any hefsek covering your erva, you could say Shema underneath there, so long as you tighten around your neck. Now there's a hefsek between your head and your erva. Then that's sufficient to say Shema. And there are those who say, no, al-libo, it has to be between the heart and the erva. Not between the head and the erva, but between the heart and your erva. Can't be libo ro'eh et ha'erva. Can't be your heart is seeing your erva. I can't even see you, let alone hear you. Baruch Hashem. So let's imagine that, first of all, the time is passing. And secondly, let's imagine you don't have to get around the Netilat Yadayim. Again, Netilat Yadayim is 6 machloket rishonim. It's 6 different opinions within the medieval authorities what the reason for it is. But simply put, is 2, Rashba and Rosh. But the reason, let's say, according to the Rosh, is because Yadayim maskaniot. Your hands have been touching the areas, the covered areas of your body. So if you wore gloves, according to Rosh, you would be fine. Let's imagine we got around that. We're not discussing the halachot of Netilat Yadayim, but let's discuss the Shema. Can you say Shema? Can you say Birkat Torah? You woke up in the morning, right? Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, by the way, they bring in his biography, is a 2-volume biography, beautiful biography of his. It's called Aleu Lo Yibol, and in there it says that he was very makpid that his kids should not miss Zman Kriyat Shema. And one Shabbat morning he came, he already was after Tefillah, and Zman Kriyat Shema was mamash passing, and one of his children was still sleeping. Can you imagine? That would never happen in KBT. But he wakes them up, and he says, say Shema right now, no Birkat Torah, no, you're missing a Deoraita. And so you have to halacha deal with that. Birkat Torah, we got to get to the Siman Memba very quickly, B'ezrat Hashem, in our daily daf of Shulchan Aruch soon. But that's something that you're talking about missing a Shema, especially according to Rambam. That seems to be that Zman Kriyat Shema is by Netzach Hama, afterwards it's just b'diavad. Then it becomes a real question. Says the Gemara. So wait a second. So the first shita, how does he deal with the fact that your heart is seeing the erva? So says the Gemara, Kasavar libo ro'eh et ha'erva mutar. He holds that you need a division between the head and the erva, not the heart and the erva. He disagrees. It's a machloket. Amar Rafuna, second white line is this. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Haya ma'alech bemevuot ha'metunafot, maniach yado al pi vekoreh kriyat shema. Massive chidush. Rabbi Yochanan said, he is saying it in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Rav Huna is saying it in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, that if you're saying Shema and you go passing by mavuot ha'metunafot, alleys and streets that are dirty. Nowadays, the equivalent of that would be in the alleys that they have garbage that smells, like the dumpsters in the back of restaurants and so on and so forth. Sometimes the entire alley smells horrible. And that's considered like tzo'ah, that's considered like excrement. So what do you do with that? Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan, again, Rav Huna is saying in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Maniach yado al piv vekoreh kriyat shema. No problemo. You could put your hand on your mouth and continue saying Shema. No problem. Even though that smells horrible, there's tzo'ah excrement in the alley, or this bad smell, bad odor, you can still say Shema. This is the shita, the massive chidush that Rav Huna said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Amar le, no, mouth. So what does that mean? So let's see. Amar le Rav Chisda, ha'elokim. He said, I take an oath. It's like a lashon shivua. Even im amarah li Rabbi Yochanan befumeh, you're quoting Rabbi Yochanan. Even if Rabbi Yochanan would be brought back from the dead and he would say to me himself with his own mouth, I would not listen to him. Rav Chisda says, basically, lo sa'itna le, I wouldn't listen to him. Why? Because he holds that when you are in mevuot ha'metunafot, it's like you're in the Bet HaKiseh. Absolutely, there's no way around it. You cannot say Dvarim Shebikusha in Mavuot HaMetunafot. When you're in vicinity of garbage, of smelling excrement, and so on, it's like you're in the Bet HaKiseh. You cannot say Shema. How dare you say in Bet HaKiseh Kriyat Shema? Ika de'amri. There are those who say, Amar Rabba Barachana, Amar Rabbi Yusha ben Levi. The Rabba Barachana was the one that said it in the name of Rabbi Yusha ben Levi, not Rabbi Yochanan. The same halacha. If you're walking past through the back alleys that are dirty and they have excrement and so on, garbage, that you put your hand on your mouth and you say Shema. And the same Rav Chisda says, Ha'elokim, I swear, Imam Amarati Rabbi Yusha ben Levi, if you would bring Rabbi Yusha ben Levi and he would say it to me himself, with his mouth, lo sayitna leh, I wouldn't listen. So, first of all, what does that mean exactly? That when you have a cover on your mouth, you could say Shema, right? How does that work? Just because you covered your mouth? So they say, because of Kol HaNeshama Ta'aliyah, and we're going to see that, Kol HaNeshama Ta'aliyah, that if the Evarei HaNeshima, if your mouth and your nose, that you're breathing your Neshama upwards through, is covered, is clean, then it's fine. If that's your immediate surroundings, so to speak, it's mutar to say. At least if you were in the middle of it and you want to continue. Says the Gemara, did ever Rav Huna say such a thing even? Did he ever say such a thing? Rav Huna himself said, we know. Talmid Chacham asur lo la'amod b'makom hatinofet. That a Torah scholar is asur for him to stand and be stationary in a place of tinofet, in a dirty place. Why? Because the Talmid Chacham hopefully always is thinking of Torah, is always learning Torah. He cannot stand without thinking in Torah. And therefore, it's asur for him to stay in a dirty place, because in a dirty place he can't think of Torah either, says the Gemara. So Rav Huna is saying that you can't even stand in a place of Tum'ah because you can't even think of Divrei Torah. So how in the world would Rav Huna say in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that you could say Shema passing through Mavoot HaMetunafot, the dirty alleys? Says the Gemara. Lo kasha, it's not the question. Why? Kan be'omed, kan be'malech. One of them is standing stationary, one of them is walking. What's the difference? The Rashba, Rabbi Shlomo ben Aderet, one of the Gedolei HaRishonim, explains this Gemara like this. He says, the difference is, V'haya machanecha kadosh, as we explained, that your encampment, your machane around you should be kadosh. When you are standing stationary, that's your machane. While you're passing through, that's a machane, that's not a machane, that's not an encampment. You're walking. So the whole Isur does not apply if you're not stationary. So therefore, you could have a reality in which Rav Huna says you can't stand, the Talmid Chacham should not stand in a dirty place because that's his machaneh, and he's going to be thinking in Torah while being in a dirty place. But you could say the same Rav Huna could still hold that you could say Shema passing through Mavoot HaMetunafot because you have no machaneh. You're passing, right? You're shooting through a dirty place. It's not considered a lack of machane kadosh. Says the Gemara. Now go back to Rabbi Yochanan. You said that Rabbi Yochanan is the one that holds you could pass through dirty alleys and say Shema. Did Rabbi Yochanan ever say such a thing? Says the Gemara. One of the great Talmidim of Rabbi Yochanan was Rabbi Barachana. And Rabbi Barachana said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, in any place you could think of Divrei Torah aside from Bet HaKiseh u Bet HaMerchas. And says the Gemara, and if you say that here also is the difference between walking and being stationary, you can't be any. Rabbi Abahu was going behind Rabbi Yochanan, and he was saying Shema, and they passed into Mavoot HaMetunafot. They got to a dirty place, and he stopped saying Shema. His student of Rabbi Yochanan stopped saying Shema, And then when they passed through and the smell stopped, he asked Rabbi Yochanan. He said, what do I do? Do I go back? Kimata b'magvot metunafot ishtik. Amar le Rabbi Yochanan, lehechan ehtar. He asked his Rebbe. Rabbi Yochanan said, where do I go back to? And Rabbi Yochanan told him, Im shahita kedei ligmor et kula chozer lerosh. If your pause was long enough that you could have said the whole Shema in that point, then you go back to the beginning of Shema, which indicates that Rabbi Yochanan himself holds that's asur to say Shema in Mavot HaMetunafot, because otherwise he would say just continue from where you stopped, because the pause was not really a pause. And the Gemara is going to answer. This is what I just realized we're out of time. This is a stira in Rabbi Yochanan, which has a beautiful answer, and Be'ezrat Hashem will discuss this in the days to come. So